I am Emily, and I have tended this Lancaster County ground my whole life. Right now, I want you to go get yourself a cup of coffee or tea and a notebook and a pen, because what I am about to tell you is worth writing down. You will want to remember it, I promise you. There is a garden down the way from a neighbour of mine, an old woman who has tended that plot for 30 years. And in all that time, you will not find a single weed in it. Not a one. Clean soil between every row, paths without a blade of grass in the cracks, beds like something out of a picture book all season long. For years I told myself she was just lucky, or had special soil, or spent every waking hour out there on her knees. But one day I finally swallowed my pride and walked over and asked her how she does it. And what she told me was so simple and so cheap that I near laughed, not because it was funny, but because I had spent years fighting weeds the hard way, while the answer sat in a cupboard in my own kitchen the whole time. Today, I'm going to give you her whole secret. Go get that notebook and write this down. I know I'm breaking a rule by telling all of this, by making it known. Our ways are often kept quiet, passed down by word of mouth within the community. But I see the world changing. I see folks struggling, fighting a losing battle with their gardens, and I feel in my heart that the good Lord gave us this wisdom to use, not to hide. The bounty of the earth is meant for everyone, and I believe with all my heart that we have a duty to share it. It is not wrong to pass along the knowledge of good, honest work. So I am telling you this plainly, not as a secret kept, but as a gift freely given. Now let me be straight with you about why the things most folks try do not work, so you understand what we are doing. Hand pulling. Hours on your knees with a sore back, and a week later it is all back as if you never touched it because the root broke off and grew again. The harsh chemical weed killers from the store, the strong stuff. Yes, they work, but I do not care to use them, for they harm the very life in the soil, the little creatures and fungi and bacteria that make your garden grow at all. And I would rather not pour something I cannot pronounce onto ground I mean to eat from. And the homemade tries, the vinegar, the boiling water. They burn the tops of the weed, but leave the root alive. So it comes right back. And salt. Well, salt kills a weed, sure enough, but it also poisons that patch of ground for years. Nothing will grow there. So salt is no answer at all. It is surrender. I say this plainly because folks hear that salt kills weeds and go pour it about, and then wonder why nothing will grow in that spot for 2 or 3 years after. Salt does not wash out and break down the way our soda does. It lingers in the ground and sour it for a long, long time so that you have not cleared a weed patch. You have made a dead patch where not even your good plants will grow. Never put salt where you ever mean to grow anything again. Our baking soda, by contrast, breaks down in the soil before long, and rain washes it through. So used in sensible amounts, it does no such lasting harm. That is a chief reason the soda is the better choice. So we want something cheap and safe that does better than all of those, and that is what my neighbour gave me. Write this recipe down, word for word. Here is her recipe, and it costs pennies. Made of things you likely have in the house this minute. Into a good bit of hot water, not boiling but hot, you stir a generous amount of plain baking soda until it dissolves. Then you add a spoonful of plain dish soap and a couple spoonfuls of ordinary vinegar and stir it gentle, and that is your spray. Each part does its work. The baking soda is the heart of it, for it is strongly alkaline, and most weeds want a sour acid sort of ground. So when you coat the leaves in that alkaline soda, it burns and dries the leaf, drawing the water out of it. The vinegar helps the soda cut through the waxy coat on the leaf, so it can do its work. And the dish soap is the clever part, for it breaks the water's tendency to bead up and run off. So the spray spreads in a thin film over the whole leaf, and clings there instead of rolling off onto the ground. Mix it fresh each time you mean to use it, for it weakens sitting around. And a word on the why of the dish soap, for folks wonder at it. The leaf of a plant is coated in a fine waxy skin that sheds water, which is why a drop of plain water beads up and rolls right off a leaf and does nothing. Spray plain soda water on a weed, and most of it would run straight off onto the ground, wasted. The soap breaks that beading so the spray lies flat and clings in a thin film over every part of the leaf and stays there to work instead of rolling off. It is the same reason a bit of soap helps any garden spray cling. A small thing, but it is the difference between the spray working and running off useless. Now, here I must be honest with you, more honest than some who sell this idea, because I will not promise you what it cannot do. This spray works wonderfully on the young weeds, the annual weeds, the grass and seedlings in your paths and cracks, burning them down clean. On those, it is a fine and near complete kill. But on the tough old perennial weeds, the ones with the deep taproots like the dandelion that goes down a foot or more, or the bindweed whose root can go down several feet, or the ground elder that runs its roots in a network underground, one spraying will not kill the whole root. It burns the top down, and that weakens the plant. But those deep, tough roots have reserves and will send up new shoots. For those stubborn ones, you must spray again each week for 2-3 weeks, hitting the new growth each time, and each time it comes back weaker until at last the root is starved out and it gives up. So this is not one magic shot that kills every weed to the root forever. It is a fine, cheap knockdown for the easy weeds and a patient weakening for the hard ones. Anyone who tells you a spray of baking soda kills a bindweed root in one go is fooling you, and I will not. The reason is simple enough. A weed like the dandelion or the bindweed stores its strength down deep in that long root, like a man with food laid by in the cellar. When you burn off the top, you have taken away its leaves, but it still has all that stored strength below to grow new ones. So it sends up fresh leaves from the reserve. But here is the thing. Every time it must do that, it spends down its stored strength to grow leaves that you then burn off again before they can feed the root back up. Do that 2 or 3 times running, week after week, and you bleed the root dry of its reserves, and at last it has nothing left to send up, and it dies. So with the tough perennials, patience and repetition is the whole game. You are not killing it in one blow. You are starving it over a few weeks. Know that going in, and you will not be discouraged when it comes back the first time for that, is expected. Write that down in your book. Patience is the key with the deep-rooted ones. And now, the most important rule of this spray, the one you must never forget, for it cuts both ways. This spray kills any green thing it touches. It does not know your weed from your lettuce. So you use it only where you want nothing at all to grow. On your paths, in the cracks of your paving and driveway, along the edges of your beds, and you spray a weed standing on its own. You never ever spray it broadcast over a garden bed where your vegetables grow, nor over your lawn, for it will kill your vegetables and burn brown patches in your grass, just the same as the weeds. In your vegetable beds, you pull by hand, or you mulch, which I will come to. When you must spray a weed standing close among your good plants, hold a piece of cardboard up between them as a shield, or paint the spray right onto the weed's leaves with a little brush. Spray it on a dry day, with no rain coming toward evening when the sun is off it, for the evening sun will not dry it too fast, and there is no dew yet, and it has all night to work. There is good sense in each part of that. You want a dry day with no rain coming for a day, for a rain soon after just washes your spray off before it can work. You want the weed itself dry, not wet with dew or rain, for water on the leaf only dilutes your spray and weakens it. And you want the evening rather than the hot noon, because the blazing midday sun dries your spray to a useless crust in minutes before it can soak in and work. While sprayed in the cool evening, it stays moist and working on the leaf all through the night. Dry weed, dry day toward evening. Those are the 3 conditions, and they make a real difference, and keep it well away from any pond or well, for in quantity it can change the water and harm the fish. So that is the first part, the knockdown. But here is what my neighbour knew that makes all the difference. The second part, the preventing. And this is the real secret of her clean garden. You have your recipe, you have your spray. Now here is the most important part. Put a big star next to this in your notebook. Killing the weeds that are there is only half the battle. For the soil is full of weed seeds, thousands of them in every square foot waiting years for their chance, and the moment you clear one weed, another seed sprouts to take its place. So the real art is stopping those seeds from ever sprouting. And the way you do that is mulch. Mulch is simply a blanket of material laid over the bare soil, and it does two great things. It blocks the light from the soil, and a weed seed cannot sprout in the dark. So covered ground simply does not grow weeds, and it holds the moisture in the soil, so you water far less. This is the most important and most overlooked thing in all of gardening, and it is the whole reason my neighbours' beds stay clean while everyone else fights weeds all summer. Now, what you mulch with depends on where. For your flower beds and ornamental plantings, use a good bark mulch, a layer a few inches thick, which looks handsome, suppresses the weeds, and breaks down slow to feed the soil over a couple of years before you top it up. You can often get wood chips cheap or even free from a tree man glad to be rid of them, which is cheaper still than the bagged bark. For your vegetable beds, do not use bark, which can sour the soil for some crops, but use straw or your dried grass clippings a few inches thick laid around your plants, which is cheap, smothers the weeds, holds the moisture, and rots down to feed the ground. And for the cracks in your paving and your paths, after you have sprayed them clean, fill the cracks with sand. And the old woman mixes a little baking soda into that sand, about a part of soda to 10 of sand. And that alkaline sandy fill keeps the weeds from rooting back in the cracks. Once a year, she freshens it and has her peace. And here is the deeper truth of mulch that makes it worth more than any spray. The spray fights the weed that is already up, but the mulch stops the war before it begins, for it never lets the seed wake at all. A patch of bare soil in the sun is an invitation. Every weed seed in it just waiting for the light, but a patch of soil under a good blanket of straw or bark stays dark, and the seeds sleep on, unsprouted year after year. So, while your neighbour sprays and pulls and frets over his bare beds all summer, your mulched beds simply do not grow the weeds in the first place. Lay it thick enough, a few good inches, for a thin scattering does little. The weeds push right through it. But a proper thick blanket of several good inches smothers them and keeps them down. And it does a second kindness, besides holding the moisture in the ground so your plants want far less watering in the dry of summer and rotting down slow to feed the soil. Mulch is the nearest thing to a free lunch there is in all of gardening. It stops the weeds, saves the water, and feeds the ground all at once. And there is one more honest helper I will mention for those who want it, though it is not needful. There is a thing called corn gluten meal, a natural byproduct which, spread on the soil in early spring before the weeds sprout, will stop many seeds from germinating. A natural pre-emergent, while not harming plants already up and growing. It costs more than baking soda, but far less than the store chemicals. And you sow it on the surface early in the season. That is an extra, not a must, but it works, and it is one more cheap natural thing in place of the dear chemical preventers. So, put the two parts together, and you have her whole system, and it is simple. Early in the spring, when the weeds first sprout, you spray your paths and cracks and bed edges with the baking soda spray, knocking down what is there, going back over the tough perennials weekly till they give up. Then you clear away the dead weeds which come up easy now, and then you lay your mulch. Bark on the flower beds, straw on the vegetables, sand in the cracks, blanketing the bare soil so new weeds cannot sprout. Do that. And where you spent 40 hours a year on your knees weeding before, you will spend a few hours all season just walking through every couple weeks to spot spray the few stragglers that blow in and root on top of the mulch. That is the difference between a garden that is a joy and a garden that is slave labour. My neighbour put it to me in a way I have not forgotten. She said, "A garden is like keeping a house. You can mop the floor a little every single day forever, or you can give it one good deep cleaning and then simply keep it up with a light touch after. The spray and the mulch together are that one good deep cleaning done early in the spring, and the rest of the season is just the light keeping up. A walk-through and a spot spray now and then. Do the hard work once at the right time, and reap an easy, clean garden all the rest of the year. That is the whole of her 30 years' wisdom in a sentence. Write that down. It is a motto to live by in the garden." Now let me say the small honest word about why your neighbour's grandmother's cheap weed answers got forgotten and you were sold the dear chemical jugs instead. Not to rile you up, just so you see the shape of it. There is good money in the $40 jug of weed killer bought again and again every season, and in the bags of this and that from the garden centre. And there is no money at all in a man knowing that a box of baking soda and a bale of straw will keep his garden cleaner. You cannot patent baking soda. You cannot charge dear for straw and bark and sand. So nobody advertises them. No business is built on teaching them. And over the years these cheap old ways simply fell out of the common knowing, while the dear jugs got all the telling. I am not saying a man schemed to hide this from you. No one had to. It is worse than a conspiracy, because it is a system nobody had to coordinate. It simply pays to sell the dear jug and pays nothing to teach the cheap box and bale. And so the old ways went quietly untaught, not hidden by any plotter, just left unsaid because no one profited by saying it. And you know, the thing that struck me most in all this was not the recipe nor the science of it. It was that the answer I had hunted for years was right over the fence the whole time in the head of a neighbour I saw near every day. And all I had to do was set down my pride and ask. How often is it so in life that we hunt the complicated answer and buy the dear product, while the plain answer is held by someone right beside us, if we would only humble ourselves to ask? That is a lesson worth more than the weed spray to my mind. Now I want to hear from you, and I ask honest because I learn the whole country from these comments. Tell me in the comments below which weed plagues you the worst, the dandelion, the bindweed, the creeping Charlie, the ground elder. And I will gladly tell you how best to deal with that particular one, for each wants a slightly different hand. And tell me your county and your climate, because the weeds differ greatly across the country, and I like to map it by where you all write from. I read everyone. Next time I want to show you how to make a homemade fertilizer from cheap plain things that will swell your tomato harvest like you would not believe. The old way of feeding your tomatoes for next to nothing instead of buying the dear bottled plant foods. For a well-fed tomato plant gives back tenfold. The old people kept their gardens clean, not with a shelf of dear chemicals, but with cheap plain things and a bit of knowing. A box of soda, a bale of straw, a blanket of bark over the bare ground, and the patience to prevent rather than only to fight. There is a deep wisdom in tending a garden as a living thing to be kept in balance rather than a battle to be won with poison. The garden kept clean by knowing and prevention rather than by the chemical jug is the garden that remembers how the old people really gardened. The people who built this country with their hands knew that. So, take your notebook, take your pen, and take these secrets with you. And may your garden grow as a blessing to you and your family.